Hi, Vannyboy here. This is part 2 of episode 24, Made for Syndication Television. We went long as normal. If you haven't seen part 1, go do that first, then come back here to part 2, and we're having fun, so let's head back out to the playground.
Welcome to the rusty playground. Mattyman and Vannyboy hanging around, kinda sorta speaking for the coolest generation. It's a cultural bash, picking through the 70s and 80s trash can, kicking back, keeping it slack for the Gen-X nation. You might skin your knees, you might contract a blood disease. Well, that's what you get for hanging around in the rusty playground. Welcome to the rusty playground. Ow!
Okay, Vannyboy, what's next?
Well, Matty Man, our next show is arguably the highest quality show on this entire list. It's nothing short of the best acted, best written, best executed sci-fi show of all time, television show. Yet most people have never even heard of it. I'm talking about Farscape. Honestly, other than Highlander and Star Trek The Next Generation, no show on this list should even be considered in the same breath. Before you say, Vannyboy, you idiot, don't oversell it, I don't think I could. Farscape was
Let me say that. Let me do that. Vannyboy, you idiot, don't oversell it.
I don't think I could, Matty Man.
Okay, well, good to know.
Farscape was on the Sci-Fi Channel from 1999 to 2003, and then aired a 3-hour movie, Farscape: The Peacekeeper Wars, in late 2004. This
3-hour movie? What? No,
you'll see. This was the first show that mixed real humans with Jim Henson Studios creations in a realistic, emotional adult setting. We're talking about puppets that are very complex, take multiple people to operate, and at the time had the most advanced technology to even pull that off. It led to a real emotional performances. Sometimes it was easy to forget that what you were looking at wasn't a living thing. Well, okay, you would never see a puppet and actually think that it wasn't a real thing. But it didn't feel like you were just watching an actor perform through a puppet. It seemed like the puppet was acting. I mean, just watch it and you'll see what I mean. Look, I'm a real mark for puppets, okay? My favorite TV show of all time, Mystery Science Theater 3000, is a puppet show. I know puppets. This was the Citizen Kane of puppetry. The story is about
Get your heart out, Muppets.
That's right. It's on another level than any of that. Even on a way better level than the Gelflings and stuff from Dark Crystal. It's incredible what they did. The story is about American astronaut John Crichton, played by Ben Browder, who gets sucked into a wormhole during a NASA test flight, ending up on the other side of the universe. He finds himself in the middle of an escape attempt by Moya, a living Leviathan ship carrying a cadre of alien fugitives who have literally just escaped peacekeeper imprisonment. Peacekeepers are a militaristic not humanoid, they look like humans. They are human-looking species because they're played by humans. What am I talking about? Who police that section of space with an iron fist. Crichton's ship ends up colliding with a peacekeeper ship, killing the pilot, the brother of a powerful peacekeeper commander, who now seeks revenge against Crichton. And that's the first arc of many amazing arcs to take place over the next 4 seasons and a movie. Crichton is out of his depth and a great surrogate for us, the viewers. He doesn't understand anything that's going on. He's never seen an alien, so that's a shock. He doesn't understand their language. He doesn't understand the technology. He doesn't understand the factions governing the space around him. He's a human, something they've never even seen before, even though humans and peacekeepers look identical. And, being that they're hated by anything that isn't a peacekeeper, well, not a good start for John Crichton. They inject a translator microbe that everyone in the show has that allows him to communicate with literally every known species in that part of the universe.
That's sort of their universal translator.
Yeah, and it's an actual like bug that does it for him. However, the science, politics, and culture are completely alien, pun intended, to Crichton. And so that's the setup for one of the most fleshed out, inventive science fiction stories ever told. I'm assuming that because they didn't already have an established universe, no established rules, nothing, that they just said, let's just be as creative and inventive as we can by still being grounded in reality. While there was, great science fiction that pushed the boundaries of believability, there's no magic. There's nothing that, you could say, what a bunch of bullshit. So no force, no Avada Kedavra in space. And as I said, there were a few things that pushed believability, but nothing that anyone would consider completely ridiculous. I'm sure that one of the draws of this show for me was that it's basically a video game come to life. I mean that in the very best possible way. I'm talking on the level of Mass Effect, if anyone knows what that is. Of course they do, because it sold millions and millions of copies. And it's the greatest science fiction trilogy video game series, hands down. There's no argument there. Through Crichton, just like Commander Shepard, the character we control in Mass Effect, you learn through experience all about this foreign world, universe really, that we've been thrust into. And just like in video games, Crichton makes his way from bumbling, rumbling, and stumbling around to becoming a very respected and, by some, feared force in the show. But it's progressive, and it feels natural. The setting that Crichton is thrust into is concrete. So all of these factions existed for hundreds of years or even thousands of years before he came in. So long, in fact, that the thought of behaving or solving problems the way a human would, adapting to the scenario in front of you with empathy and thought, is preposterous. And it's this, John's humanity, that sets him apart. The show had a large ensemble cast of recurring characters, and I mean, it's really just in a class of its own here. And while some of these tropes are familiar to us, the rogue, the mystic, the vampire, the warrior, those kind of characters, they're presented in a way that I had never seen before nor since. And here's some of the cast of characters and just a little bit about them. So I told you about John Crichton. So here's Aaron's son, played by Claudia Black, who's now primarily a voice actor. She's a peacekeeper soldier who gets exiled for being contaminated, quote unquote, by contact with Crichton. She's not very happy about this and blames him for that, which I can understand. Her arc from stone cold soldier to fully realized emotional caring person is arguably the heart of the show and one that they take their time with. Moya, as I mentioned before, she's the living Leviathan ship that they're flying around in. The Leviathans are a species that live sort of like, they live in space sort of like a fish do in the sea. And while Moya isn't really a character per se, she doesn't she doesn't speak or anything like that. The crew treat her as such. They talk to her and all that kind of stuff. There's Pilot, which is Moya's navigator, physically bonded to the ship. Pilot is a very large puppet controlled by up to 5 people at a time. Very complex, very emotive. And when something bothers or excites Pilot, you don't say, wow, look how great they did with that puppet. You say, something's bothering Pilot. They truly act.
Yeah,
it's wild.
You are stay in it. You're not taken out of the scene.
Not at all. It's very well done. There's Diargo, which is a Luxan warrior played by Anthony Simcoe. Your first thought, when you're around, you see him at the first couple times, is Worf, from Star Trek. But he is definitely a different character. At first, he's very antagonistic against Crichton, as all the other characters are. But as time goes on, they become something in the line of brothers. This happens again, as I've mentioned, over a long period of time throughout the show. This isn't a, I hate you, followed by, he saved his life and then helping him up and says, okay, I'll name my first kid after you. No, just like Crichton and Aaron's son, and indeed all the rest of the characters, this is a relationship that develops over time. It was very bold for the creators of the show to take their time, but the payoff is that we, the audience, really grow to care about the characters and believe their relationship with Crichton. There's Zahn, who is a bald, blue-skinned priestess played by Virginia Hay. Zahn is an amazing character. Her species has genuine psychic and spiritual abilities. She can share mental status with others, enter people's minds, sort of, in a way, and has a light-based attack that can be used as a weapon in extreme circumstances. If any character in this show pushed the limits of believability, it's Zahn. But her character was acted with so much nuance that it comes across as believable, especially in such a foreign world. And then there's Rigel, a deposed ruler, small, slug-like, and pompous. He's a puppet, obviously. He's out for himself, and his only goal is to regain his throne. Rigel is a 2.5-foot puppet that hovers on a specialized scooter. I know I keep saying this, but even though it's a puppet, the performance that comes across seems genuinely spring from Rigel. It's incredible. Rigel's probably closest to a Dr. Smith character from Lost in Space. He'll sell out anything and anyone to get his throne back.
He's sort of comic relief in a way.
He is, yeah. He is, exactly. At the beginning of the show, he doesn't give a shit about anyone. By the end, he cares very much for them, but he grows to want the throne out of duty and honor as opposed to wanting the power. So they kind of change him as well, because before he just wanted the power.
So they actually do a reverse Dr. Smith. They make him more fleshed out over time.
Yes, he's not a comic book character or cartoon character by the end of it. And last but not least, the real heavy of the narrative, Scorpius, played brilliantly by an actor named Wayne Pygram. Scorpius looks like a cross between Pinhead from Hellraiser and some SBDM zombie. He's not a zombie. He's alive, but he's pale and gross and kind of slimy. Scorpius becomes the main antagonist of the show by far, and the relationship between him and Crichton is one of the most complex in all of science fiction, perhaps the most complex in 1990s science fiction. Scorpius is the genetic product of a peacekeeper woman and a Scaran, which I'm showing on the screen right now. White, demon-looking creatures, very aggressive, and crossbreed themselves with other species by force, I would have to mention, to make better, stronger, faster, and more deadly versions of their race. He was considered an abomination and tortured by other Scarans during his childhood. They only tolerate him because of his brilliance and effectiveness, but perhaps wouldn't be so tolerant if they knew his true motivations, which is to extract information about wormholes from Crichton's mind, master it, and use it to destroy the Scarans. He's not a fan of the people he came from. He's not a fan of anybody except Scorpius. Yeah. One of the most memorable aspects of Crichton and Scorpius's relationship was in season 2, when Scorpius implanted a neural clone of himself into Crichton's brain as a method of surveillance and manipulation. Only Crichton could see and hear him, so Crichton called that version in his head Harvey. However, as time went on, the relationship became something much, much more complex. While it happened over a decade before, it's similar to the Joker character in the final Batman Arkham game, Arkham Knight, where Bruce has an ever-present mental force inside of his head that eventually goes from mental torment to aiding Crichton, blurring the line between enemy and dark conscience. I'm not going to spoil things here. I know that the show is 20 plus years old, but if you have a passing interest in science fiction done as well as it could possibly be, please go watch Farscape. If it were made today, it would be an Apple TV property, unique and wonderful. Although, now that I think of it, it might be more apt to say almost HBO or almost Netflix, because they always seem to bungle the ending. Okay, that's not fair and not totally true.
No, and it's a good point, though.
The 4th season ends on a massive cliffhanger. I mean, game-changing for the entire narrative. Unfortunately for cast, crew, and producers, when they wrote, directed, and filmed the episode, they had no idea that it was going to be canceled. Fans were in an uproar. The cast was in an uproar. Not only did they not want to do that to the fans, but they also loved the characters they portrayed and the relationships with each other as actors that they had built. You could feel it in the product. These people were tight. So when it ended on that cliffhanger and word got out that, nope, sorry, we're out, fans were outraged. The show was a sleeper hit and never got the respect it was due, other than from the industry, quote unquote. But imagine if Firefly fans had 4 seasons of that show only to have it end with a cliffhanger of epic proportions, then get canceled. Yeah, well, that kind of happened, but only after 1 season. We had 4 seasons of these characters. It was brutal. And so fans did what fans do. They started a campaign to bring it back for one last season to resolve the cliffhanger. And to no one's surprise, they declined to make a new season. However, to everyone's delight, they decided to make a 3-hour movie. Laughing now, Mattyman. To make a 3-hour movie to not only resolve the cliffhanger, but to tie up arcs and loose ends in what can only be considered sticking the landing. So no one was safe on. It was great. Very, very rare that anything like that happens. So no one was safe on the show. No character was static on the show. No story seemed silly or went nowhere on the show. For me, this is the greatest non-Star Trek television sci-fi show of all time. And I simply cannot suggest it enough. Do yourself a favor and watch it from the beginning, seasons 1 through 4, followed by the 3-hour movie Farscape: The Peacekeeper War.
And where might you stream that now?
It might be on Netflix, or I can only imagine you could at least, buy it or rent it through Amazon, I would assume. In the world of Made-For-Syndication, this is the apex of storytelling, the apex of puppetry, the apex of universe building, and the apex of character development. I've said enough. 10 out of 10 pop rocks. Mattyman, try and top that, my friend.
Well, I can't, okay? By what you were just spewing, no one can. Certainly not with my last pick, a little made-for-syndication show called Forever Night. How do I describe Forever Night? Well, have you ever had a pair of shoes that every time you saw them in the closet thought, I bought these shoes because they look super cool and were well made, but when I got them home, I realized that while fairly comfortable, they really don't seem as cool or well made as I had hoped. But fuck it, I own them now and they're pretty comfortable and I do actually like them. Well, that's Forever Night.
Nice.
In 1989, CBS ran the pilot for a show called Forever Night, which followed the exploits of 800-year-old vampire Nick Knight, a homicide detective in New York City, as he tries to atone for centuries of sins and find a cure for vampirism. He sustains himself on animal blood, refusing to feed off of humans anymore, which weakens him. I mean, how flippin' cool is that? I mean, could it be cooler? Well, yes. Now imagine that the aforementioned Nick Knight, New York City vampire homicide detective, was played by Rick Springfield? Huh? Damn right. Rick Springfield. Vampires. New York City. Badass. A guaranteed success and return on investment for CBS, and it's exactly that kind of guaranteed success and return on investment that CBS loved to turn down in the late 80s. So they passed.
Yes.
Then 3 years later, with the success it heard being made behind the scenes with the new fangled production style of Made-For-Syndication, CBS decided to slash the budget, move production from New York City to Toronto, and recast Rick Springfield with Welsh actor Garrett Wynne Davies. Is that right?
That is right.
Okay. Well, there we are. There should be some more consonants in his name if he's Welsh, but
yeah, no kidding.
As a matter of fact, every one of the actors from the pilot was replaced, with the exception of John Kapelos, who reprised his role as Detective Skanky. Yes, pronounced Skanky.
Yes.
Skanky.
Weird.
He was Detective Skanky. Gen Xers will recognize Kapelos as the janitor from The Breakfast Club, as well as 57,000 other things he was in during the 80s through the 90s. You know, well-worn character actor, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Besides Nick, there was Janet Descharmes, a vampire companion from Nick's past who ran a nightclub that catered to vamps. They had a centuries-long relationship, one that was revealed as the show goes on. Funny enough, Janet had a thick accent and called Nick Nicholas.
Oh, Nicola.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I've watched the show many times.
Yeah.
All right. Funny enough, Janet had a thick accent and called Nick Nicholas. There was the aforementioned Detective Skanky,
Yeah.
who was Nick's detective partner, who was constantly trying to figure out how Nick was always the first to the scene and or survived what could have sworn was 15 gunshots to the abdomen. Skanky was comic relief, but also warmly written. He was a family man and had a charm that, frankly, only Kapelos could bring to that kind of blue-collar, everyman kind of...
Yeah, he was good at it. It's probably why he was the only one they kept, now that I think about it. So.
Yes. Dr. Natalie Lambert, the police coroner, figured out that Nick was a vampire and had been helping him find the cure. She was Nick's romantic partner throughout the series. More on that in a bit. And last but certainly not least, there was Lucien LaCroix, played brilliantly by Nigel Bennett. He did a great job, yeah. He was the vampire who turned Nick in the 13th century. He was a villain, but one in the vein of a love-hate kind of bad guy.
I do all of those things just for you, man.
Not unlike Lestat Delacourt. And by not unlike, I mean pretty much the same, but this was TV, so they couldn't get into the overtop sexual depravity and murder of Interview with the Vampire. One of the most memorable things about the show was that LaCroix hosted a late-night radio program, and Nick would ride around listening to him wax poetic about the things in their past that relate to that specific episode. It was cool. He was more like an Art Bell, George Knapp kind of guy. He talked about macabre things. So for people listening, it would have been like Ancient Aliens or something. But for us and Nick, it was inside information.
So it was kind of cool how Lucien would play this out. He'd be in the studio, radio studio, with the lights and it's dark and he's got the big microphone, and you'd see Nicholas sitting in his car driving along, and he'd be saying things like, well, you know what it's like when the taste of blood drives you crazy out there.
What a wonderful thing humanity is. Passionate, intelligent, inquisitive, generous, and above all, delicious.
Things like that anybody listening would be like, I'm going to call them and tell them this needs to stop. But it's like an Art Bell, George Knapp kind of, people who listen to it are listening to it because it's weird and whatever. So it plays out, but it's fine. But anyway, it was one of the coolest parts of the show, actually. So, but anyway, go ahead.
What was I doing? Let's see. A lot of the setup happened in the police station, which, let's just say, was clearly a set. Clearly. Much like Interview with the Vampire, the narrative was told through flashbacks. Nick would take a lesson he learned in the past and use it to solve the murder of the week. There was also the overarching storyline of Nick and Natalie trying to find the cure. LaCroix taunting and sometimes helping Nick, but telling him he's a fool for wanting to throw away the gift of vampirism. Skanky trying to figure out how Nick went 37 blocks in 14 seconds without a car.
A little sus.
Hey, wait a minute.
Jarrett,
one quick funny note about Jarrett Wynn Davies, and then we will get into serious spoiler territory. But before we do, Vannyboy, want to say what you got to say? Because you got a look saying you got something to tell me.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So my wife, Christina, she was young at the time that this came out, between 10 and 14. In her memory, Natalie and Nick's romance was overt and pretty much on the same level as, say, Duncan and Tessa, which, as you mentioned earlier, was one of the best and most natural in television history. Also, Nick was hot, or, at least as hot as a 10 to 14-year-old girl can find a 34-year-old man. I never got to catch more than a few episodes of the show, but I remembered how much I loved the pilot with Rick Springfield, and, this was a chance to have another show for me and Christina to watch together, so why not? As we watched the show, Christina was probably 35-ish when we watched it. At first, Nick was as hot as she remembered. I pointed out that there were times, especially when he was pissed or whatever, that he had a similar look to Rowdy Roddy Piper, an insane bundle of unfettered aggression, which Christina likes. So, yes, she was a fan. Then, as the show went on, something else happened. We started to notice that he didn't always resemble the rowdy one. Sometimes he was smiling and happy and joking. He kind of looked like Benny Hill. If she could have had a boner, it would have killed it for her. As the show went on, he looked more and more like Benny Hill and less like the icon Piper. Even to the point where when he would chase someone, one of us would do the
yakety sax.
Yes. And oh man, we would laugh every time.
Oh.
Yeah. And so his relationship with Natalie, no, turns out it wasn't that way at all. It wasn't anywhere near as nice as Duncan and Tessa. I mean, the show wanted you to believe it was some kind of massive love affair of epic proportions, but it wasn't well written enough for that to have any kind of weight along those lines. So at no point do you feel like Natalie was gaga over Nick, other than she would say, "I'm gaga over Nick." I don't blame the actors. It was the writing, directing, and budget. In little girl Christina's memory, it was an epic love affair with a happy ending. Well, Mattyman will touch on that next, but let's just say it wasn't.
Thanks for the personal insight, Vannyboy.
You're welcome.
And it's at this point that I must say, spoiler warning.
Yeah.
For the end of the show. In all the other shows we've done, our best to talk about the show without spoiling much, especially plot-wise. But in this case, well, perhaps it's not worth the ride. Let's just say it's more Game of Thrones than it is Farscape. So if you don't want to be spoiled for a show that we can suggest you not watch, unless you are a diehard fan of watching this kind of show, skip to, you got to put the timestamp up, buddy.
Yeah,
this
I was going to do that.
Here.
I'm not even going to bother, but let's pretend
Ready?
I will.
3, 2, 1. You have been warned.
Yes.
So before we get to the ending fuckaroony, let's mention something else that seriously damaged the show. One of the absolute best parts of the show was Nick's relationship with his partner, Skanky. There was a I can't take that seriously. There was a 1970-ish cop buddy show aspect about their relationship. Skanky would do or say something stupid. Nick would crack a grin. We knew what was really going on, and we all had a chuckle. Skanky was the best. Nick was the best. They had chemistry. It just elevated the show.
It did, yes.
But CBS being CBS, in their CBSingness,
Yeah.
between seasons 2 and 3, decided to reduce Skanky's screen time for some reason. So in response, John Capulus decided it was no longer worth it. Uninterested in accepting a diminished capacity on a show that he was already fourth in importance, he decided to leave. So what does CBS decide to do with such a beloved character, the comic relief and the glue between Nick and the human world? They killed him off screen in a plane explosion between his second and third season break. Wah, 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 wah. Oh, that's right. Well, that's the last episode of season 2, and it's see ya, Skanky, and start season 3 to, hey, remember that clown that you loved and got invested in his family? Well, he blew up in a plane, screaming all the way down, probably shouting, if only I had a friend who could fly and catch me. Too bad. It was a serious blow,
yes,
to be honest. And finally, Nick and Natalie. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Remember when I said that Nick lived off of animal blood, refusing to feed on human targets? Remember when I said that?
Yes.
It was a big plot line. It was a big sticking point. LaCroix would constantly taunt Nick when he was weak, saying that if he just leaned back into his vampire instincts, he would be better off and feel better. Nick refused because, like TJ Hooker, Nick is a good cop.
Yes.
Also, remember when I said that Natalie was helping Nick discover a cure for his vampirism, hoping to become human and live a regular life again? Well, Natalie believed that she did find a cure for vampirism. In an earlier episode, Natalie discovered that a vampire might be cured by feeding off the blood of someone who truly loves them. It was just a theory, but one Natalie wanted to try. And that sounds scientific, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, especially for a medical examiner.
Yeah.
Of course, he's a vampire, so I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, and if you're wrong, at least you can go on the next theory. Nope, too late, you're a vampire.
Yeah.
When Nick asked what happened if it didn't work and Natalie died, she said, then turn me into a vampire, bring me back, and we can spend eternity together trying to find a cure. That's so romantic.
Yeah.
Perfect, really. They knew the show was ending, and what a great way to do it. I mean, they had two great options here for characters on a show that people who watched to the end really, really cared about. So, yeah. CBS, being CBS, what did they choose? Let's see. A, Nick sucks Natalie's blood and through her love and sacrifice cures Nick of his vampirism, letting them lead a normal life together, dying in each other's arms in 40 years, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Or B, Nick sucks Natalie's blood, but it doesn't work. She dies, and he isn't cured. So as she requested, Nick brings her back, and the show ends with the hope that somewhere in the spans of time, our two soulmates find a cure that not only lets them lead a normal life, but also other vampires as well. Wrong. They picked option C, the option that absolutely no one would have ever even thought of having. And get ready, they had Nick bite Natalie, and since he hadn't fed on a human being in a long time, he lost control of his cravings and sucked her blood dry. She died. Nick decided to go against her wishes and would not turn her, not wanting to curse her with the same burden that he had been cursed with. Nick's maker and oldest frenemy, LaCroix, happens by and finds Nick in a terrible state of anguish and pain. LaCroix pushes Nick to turn her, as she wished, but leaves that very personal decision up to him. LaCroix offers to help his friend bury her before the sun comes up, turning her. As the sun begins to rise, Nick hands LaCroix a pointed cane, telling him he can count on LaCroix to kill him, turns his back, and tells LaCroix, "You're my closest friend." LaCroix growls, "Damn you, Nicholas!" And the camera pans away before showing what happened next. So what we're left with is Natalie's death, most likely Nick's death at the hands of his oldest friend, and LaCroix killing what was, in essence, his son, whom he had spent the entire series trying to convince to live as a vampire. It was terrible. It was the last option anyone except someone who wanted to make sure that the fan base never had a repeat watch would make. Ugh.
Terrible.
Yeah. Also, Nick's new partner plus two other characters were also killed, by the way, off screen. So it was a scorched earth ending that pretty much destroyed everything. Even for a vampire show, it was bleak. Well, in each of these, we have given you our take on the show, given it a ranking, and said whether we would suggest you watching this. In this case, and it pains me to say, potential 10 out of 10 Pop Rocks. Execution 5 out of 10 Pop Rocks. Maybe only 4 out of 10. Depends on how bad you feel about that ending. Well, and speaking of which, ending, it's a negative 666 out of 10 Pop Rocks. It's like a imaginary number. You
Yes.
know? Skip this one. While the ride is fun, the ending stabs a stake through your heart. Vannyboy, please say you have something to bring us back up, please. I mean,
Well, I do.
That's God. Ugh.
Yeah, it's horrible that the show itself is so cheesy and cheap, but enjoyable for what it was. Christina wanted to watch it because she remembered it when she was a young lass.
That's got to be fascinating to watch somebody watch something that they thought in their childhood was one thing, only to discover it's something else. I mean,
It was. That's a good point. It was cool to experience it with her because everything was.
She was probably mortified. She's probably going burying her face in her hand, like, I can't believe I like this.
Well, she goes into it like, oh, we're going to watch it. And then, sees that it's really not nearly as good as she remembered. But it becomes something that we continued to watch because it was, hey, let's watch the shitty show together that we're laughing at, which is not what they wanted, I'm sure, when they were making the show.
Yeah. Did not stand the test of time.
Yes.
Unless they wanted it to seem like a goof 20 years later.
I'll never understand what they did with the ending of this show because, like you read, they pretty much ensured that anybody who watched the show all the way to the end, which would have been a diehard fan who would have gone and bought the DVDs, right? Because the show's quality, wasn't the greatest. So people watching it to the end were diehard fans. And then you go there and see that ending that they had. It's like, man, no way. Don't go through it. It was a letdown. It one that
now
we
let me
were.
ask you this, just getting into maybe production questions. Do you think maybe they just changed writers or the showrunner or something? Something had to go.
I don't know. I have no idea.
But not even worth researching.
Yeah,
at
I didn't even look it up. Yeah, it was. It just seemed like once Skanky left, which and then the way that they did that, because like I said, that was that was really the best relationship on the whole show. And Skanky was, kind of funny and a little bit of a greasy kind of character. And, but.
And there's so many like more pleasant ways they could have just written him off. Like, he moved to LA, he got a job out there,
Yeah. Leave it open for later. It's like in the Land of the Lost thing in the 70s when, they had a issue with the main, the dad, right? Rick Marshall. And they were like, oh, well, no, screw you. You're not coming back and we're going to just kill you. We're never even going to show your face. We're just going to hire a body double to jump through this, portal into nowhere and you'll never be seen.
Was it that
again.
he died or was it that he made it back?
He made it back without his kids.
Yeah, which is like, that's an honorable thing to do.
Yeah,
Screw you, I'm out of here. You can enjoy this dinosaur hell escape.
Yeah, well, they, is in the case of Land of the Lost, at the end of the first season, they thought that was the end of it. So they really had a situation where it was a time loop where they would jump through. The marshals learned that they could go through this portal at the exact time, but someone had to come in. So they jumped through it at the same time and were replaced by themselves at the beginning of the show.
Oh.
And so it would go on. But at the end, they do escape. But it's just, that same event takes place over and over again. But then, it was popular enough that they made another season. And,
well, the writing of that show is actually much better than people may give it credit, just because the production values were
and much better than Forever Night, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so,
but getting on to like the next quintessential syndicated series, I should say.
Yeah. So you asked me if if I could bring us back up, since that was so bleak and dark, and I say that I do have something that can bring us back up, Matty Man, back to the stars and beyond, to boldly go where no one has gone before. As we alluded to a couple of times, the final show on our list is Star Trek: The Next Generation. First, a tiny bit of context. As we all know, the original Star Trek show aired on NBC from 1966 to 1969. It was Kirk, Spock, Bones, the Enterprise. Khan!
Yeah.
I'll put that there. We all know that show. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had wanted to I'll just leave that one in there.
Yeah.
He wanted to reboot the show from, the day after it was canceled, 1969. But Paramount, who had bought Desilu at that point, they didn't believe in it. they didn't want it to be around, and so that was it, especially after it was canceled. However, after the mild success of Star Trek the Motion Picture in 79, the wild success of The Wrath of Khan in 1982, the huge success of The Search for Spock in 84, and the also huge success of The Voyage Home in 86, the one with the whales, as they call it, Paramount started to believe. So, on the backs of that success in 1987, Paramount announced a new show, Star Trek: The Next Generation, which we will just call The Next Generation of Star Trek, show based on the original show that was more influential than successful, for short. Just kidding.
Yeah. Oh man, that'd be a hell of an acronym.
It would. The rest of the Maktoof. The rest of this section is chock full of spoilers for the show, but honestly, the show was so good that even if I told you the plot and behind the scenes of every single episode, I could strongly suggest that you watch it. It's that good. Roddenberry.
I need to see it. I've only seen just some of them. I need to just go and see the whole thing. Just binge the hell out of it.
Yeah, you should. The first season's a little weaker, but at the second season on, it's incredible. So Roddenberry was adamant about distancing himself from the original. That meant no returning characters, no Kirk, Spock, Bones, no Tribble number 45,781. His first casting decision was controversial, even to himself, Patrick Stewart. Seems kind of laughable now, but while it seems almost unimaginable that anyone would have balked even at the slightest at having Patrick Stewart play the lead nowadays, back in 1987, it was a real serious risk of sinking the starship before it ever got off the space dock. See, Americans were used to Kirk in the lead, a dashing, scrapping, breaking the rules leader who knew what was right and wrong and did whatever he needed to do to make sure that right wins. Jean-Luc Picard was going to be very different. Yes, still on the side of good, but way more militarily rigid. Actually, The Next Generation was much more grounded in how Starfleet ran things.
It's actually much more realistic than how the way it would be anyway.
Yeah, it was very much more like if it was real. It was a serious military ship. So Picard needed to have a strong charisma that could make up for the lack of fisticuffs that we were used to. Stewart was in his late 40s, a classically trained theater actor, completely unknown to the American audience, and the biggest knock of all, bald. Sounds laughable, but that was a big deal at that point.
Yeah, nobody was rocking the bald other than Telly Savalas and Yul Brynner. Just wasn't a thing.
Literally, the reason bald is totally acceptable and cool now is because of Patrick Stewart.
I would say so, yeah.
He was a Brit playing a Frenchman in an American show. But Vannyboy, you may ask, if Picard is French, why does Stewart not do a French accent? Well, because in Roddenberry's mind, by the 24th century, humanity had been galvanized into more or less a singular identity. Things like accents, melanin count, and gender, things that had been used to divide us in the past, meant little when there were actual non-human beings roaming around. In his belief, humans would eventually be like, who cares if you're darker or lighter? You're one of us. So regional dialects would die out, and those human prejudices would simply disappear. Naive, perhaps, but hey, it was his vision of the future. So
long as it fits in with its own logic.
Yes, as long as it does fit in with its own logic. So Patrick Stewart became Jean-Luc Picard, captain of the USS Enterprise D, flagship of the United Federation of Planets in 2364. But the ship and show needs a crew, and Roddenberry and company hit multiple Grand Slam upper deck home runs here. I'll name the main crew in order of what I believe is importance to the show and the performance of the actor. Number 1, Brent Spiner as Lieutenant Commander Data. He's an android, the most sophisticated artificial intelligence in the Federation. He's sort of like Spock in the original show, but unlike Spock, whose arc was constantly fighting his humanity, Data's entire arc is that he is trying to become more human, in spite of the fact that he is literally incapable of emotion. He's the second officer and my favorite character, and his relationship with Picard is one of the best in all of science fiction. Next was LeVar Burton as Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge. Played with compassion and calm, which you would expect from LeVar Burton, Geordi is the ship's engineer. Unlike Mr. Scott from the original, Geordi is a by-the-numbers genius, cool under pressure. I mean, Scotty was cool under pressure, but, you know, he was scrappy. Whereas Geordi, like you kind of mentioned, the whole thing is much more believable, grounded. His relationship with Data is one of the best in the show. Geordi is blind and uses a visor to see, which we learn later he sees much better than human eyes. A fact that in one of the episodes, Geordi himself is surprised to learn. Then there's Jonathan Frakes as Commander William Riker, Picard's first officer. Picard calls him number one.
Make it so, number one.
As a nickname, which is a kind of a nod to what the captain called the first officer in the original pilot. The original pilot before William Shatner was hired. Riker is the classic action hero of the show, confident, charming, occasionally reckless. He's a perfect first officer for Picard, never afraid to ask the right questions, yet bowing to Picard's wisdom once he sets the rule.
Yes, he's the foil to Picard for sure.
Yeah. And sometimes Picard takes him up on his. I mean, it's not like he's an idiot, but, you know, Picard is pretty sharp. He's the best. Riker had turned down his own command on multiple occasions to stay aboard the Enterprise. A funny tidbit about Riker. Frakes, who has back problems, had a habit of propping his leg up on something near him when he talks, and he would just, you know, and when he would sit, he wouldn't just sit. He would swing his leg over the chair. This was way more comfortable for him with his, you know, standing on his legs for hours and hours at a time as an actor. But it became a fan favorite quirk. It's quite funny once you realize that he does that. You see it.
Yeah, I saw some animation recently where they just kept doing scenes where he's like leaning.
Yeah,
with
it's
his
quite
one leg.
funny.
Yeah.
Michael Dorn as Lieutenant Worf, the first Klingon to serve on a Starfleet vessel, maybe. Worf's parents were killed in a battle with Romulans, a battle in which a Federation ship, Enterprise C, did its best to protect the Klingons. This move of compassion was seen as so honorable by the Klingon Empire that it led to peace talks mirroring the relationship between the U.S. and the Soviet Union before their collapse. Worf, as a baby, was taken in by human parents and raised as a human, or at least in a human environment. So while his nature was aggressive like a Klingon's, he was raised with the compassion of humans. Worf's character started off very slowly, but midway through its run, Worf's stories were some of the very best in Star Trek history. After the show was over, Worf was so popular that he was transferred to Deep Space Nine, another show in the Star Trek universe. Marina Sirtis as Counselor Deanna Troi. Roddenberry was a big believer in warriors needing mental help. After Vietnam vets were dumped out into the streets and left to deal with the horrors of war on their own, the Reagan administration saw that as a great failing and did what they could to rectify that. From that time moving forward, the military began to take soldiers' mental health seriously, and by seriously, I mean into account at all. Roddenberry believed that with over 1,000 people on the Enterprise D for long stretches of time, the reality would be that there would have to be someone for mental health. So Deanna Troi was created. Also, she was a Betazoid, which was a new species created specifically for her character. Betazoids had empathic abilities, allowing them to sense emotion. I was never really personally a fan of Deanna Troi all that much, but she was an important part of nearly every plot.
Wasn't she also supposed to be filling the same kind of like emotional character that McCoy was? You know what I'm saying? Like when you had the
Bones, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. I never thought of it, but yeah, you're probably right.
That's what they were going for. You had Data as sort of like the analog for Spock.
Yeah.
And so they had to have somebody who would be the more emotional one. And like she's literally an empath, so you can't, she's focusing on the emotions.
I never even thought of it that way, but like I said, I was
thinking a little bit different now, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I love her now. I'm in love with her.
There you go. Why don't you marry her then? I'm texting Christina right now.
There you
decision.
Go. She'll accept it. It's okay. But she, like I said, she was an important part of every plot, if only to tell Picard, "I sense deception, Captain." This often led Picard to reply with his incredible voice, "No shit, Sherlock," or something like that. Troi had a past relationship with Riker. And then there was Denise Crosby as Lieutenant Tasha Yar. Tasha was chief of security in season 1, but was killed off in the episode Skin of Evil in what was purposefully written as a random, meaningless death, killed by an alien entity almost as an afterthought. I'll touch on that episode later, but it had one of the best endings of the show, really. It kind of raised that in everyone's mind. Just know that this is a cautionary tale for actors. Crosby asked to leave the show, believing that her character had no development, which is why they killed her off. She immediately regretted it, regretted that decision as the show became a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. She did return in various forms later, but Tasha, as we knew her, was dead, and pretty much so was Denise's career. The relationship between these characters is some of the best in all of television, much less science fiction. Data, in my opinion, is the best and most important character on this show. Nearly all of the important or emotional moments involve or revolve around him and his relationships. His quirks are key to the show's humanity. In truth, I don't think that they knew what they had in Data when Roddenberry created him. But in fairness, they couldn't have known that Spiner would betray the character with such nuance. For example, when they would ask Data a question, if he would have to quickly research something in his mind's eye, Spiner would move his eyes to the left and right as if he were reading something invisible. This, of course, would not be necessary for a real android, but for the audience, it was key. Spiner had a knack for making you feel like Data had emotions without ever playing him with emotions, an accomplishment that perhaps no other actor could achieve. It was incredible, and if you go back and watch him, you'll be pretty blown away by the fact that, damn. All right, so Data was an artist. Sure, he could recreate anything to the brushstroke, but he didn't. He wanted to work on making his own creations. Also, he had a cat named Spot, showing his sense of humor that he could only understand from a logical standpoint. For us, naming a cat Spot is funny because it's a dog's name, but for Data, he can't feel that humor. But he does understand that Spot is a dog's name, and by naming a cat a dog's name, it's considered humor. All of this is subtext under Spiner's acting, and you notice. For example, in Season 3, episode The Most Toys, Kavis Jaho, a collector of rare... This is one of my favorite. I love this episode. It's one of the best. A collector of rare and unique objects, often illegally, fakes Data's death in an explosion, kidnaps him, and adds him to his collection as the only fully functioning android in existence. Through threats of others, Data is ordered to sit in a chair when guests come so Kavis can show him off as his new acquisition. He is, after all, only an android, as Kavis keeps telling him. Data doesn't play ball. Kavis uses an illegal weapon to threaten his assistant unless Data complies, which he does because he doesn't want her killed. I mean, the guy's not going to harm Data, but he will harm other people if Data doesn't do what he's told. He is, after all, only an android. Eventually, there's a reason why I say this. Eventually, the crew of the Enterprise, who had been mourning Data's death, realized that they'd been fooled and tracked him down. At the same time, Kavis, whatever his name is, kills his assistant as a lesson to Data. But Data gets the weapon and aims it at Kavis. Kavis, arrogant as ever, says Data can't kill him because he's defenseless and it goes against his programming. Data thinks, then raises the weapon and fires. At that exact moment, he is transported back to the Enterprise. During the transfer, the engineer says that there's apparently a weapon that's been discharged and removes the energy that's been fired. When asked about it, Data pauses and then says that it must have gone off during transport. After Kavis is captured and placed in the brig, Data visits him. Kavis mentions the irony of how now being he's now the one on display and Data must be enjoying it. Data replies,
I do not feel pleasure. I am only an android.
In this one episode alone, there's the suggestion that Data, who supposedly cannot feel emotions like rage or hate, made a cold, calculated decision to execute someone and then choose to conceal it. It raises genuinely interesting questions about whether Data was more human than anyone realized, or whether being without emotions was capable of something darker than revenge, pure, logical elimination of a threat. Not to mention rubbing it in Kavis's face at the end, a real raise your arm and cheer moment in the series. Another quick note about Data. In one episode, the ship is hit with a virus that makes the crew drunk. Data is, of course, not affected. Tasha Yar, however, confesses to Data that she always wondered if he was anatomically correct. After realizing what she's asking, he says yes, she wants to try him out. So we see her lead Data into her quarters, and then they start to make out as the door shuts. Clearly, they have sex. After the crisis is averted, Tasha makes Data promise to never tell anyone, but a lot of people sort of assume that it happened. But Data and Tasha share something special. In the episode where Tasha dies, all this comes together. Episode where Tasha dies, they hold a funeral for her one without a body. Data, having difficulty processing Tasha's death, asks Picard in a very powerful scene if something is wrong with him.
Sir, the purpose of this gathering confuses me.
Oh, how so?
My thoughts are not for Tasha, but for myself. I keep thinking how empty it will be without her presence. Did I miss the point?
No, you didn't, Data. You got it.
Very touching. So Tasha left a small hologram copy of her own eulogy for the crew. Data kept it on his desk and would occasionally be caught looking at it. This was quite a poignant detail. Mm-hmm. The android, who supposedly couldn't feel, privately holding on to a farewell message from a fallen friend. This prop makes a return later, which I will mention, but it's this level of detail and growth of his character that makes Data one of the greatest in all of fiction. As I mentioned before, Picard and Data in particular are an incredible dynamic. Picard learns more about humanity through his relationship with Data than he does from being a human himself. He grows to love Data like a son. He even defends Data in an episode I'll mention soon, proving to the Federation that Data is alive and not just a machine. The relationship between Data and Geordi is also a key element to the show. Even though Data has no emotions, he considers Geordi his best friend. The Next Generation also introduced the holodeck, which, God, I would love to have one of these things. A recreational area where holograms gain form and can pretty much do anything. Want to play football on the 1972 Miami Dolphins? You can do that. You want to run? You can run 100 yards, even though the room is much, much smaller, and catch the ball. You can reenact the Battle of Hastings and slice through hordes of English. As long as they're not real, you can do whatever. They can't really harm you. In the Star Trek universe, this is only for recreation, but we all know if it were the real world, what the hell it would actually be used for, right? I mean,
well, yes.
Yes, well, definitely.
I just feel like they won't even go there because
no, of course not. Well, actually, they somewhat do because the guy who played, I wish I could remember his name off the top of my head. Sorry, the guy who played Howling Mad Murdoch in the A-Team. Okay. He plays a character named Barkley. And he's a fuck up. He's smart, but he's very, very nervous around anyone, and so he's never going to go anywhere. But you learn later that he has a big crush on Deanna Troi, and so he goes into the holodeck and he has adventures where he's like the dashing hero who gets Deanna Troi on his arm after kicking Riker's ass, and they catch him, and that's I don't think it's against. It's immoral to them, so it's not, which it would be, right? You wouldn't want someone having a exact copy of your wife that they can actually have sex with, So it's wild, but it would of course in real life get out of control.
It would it would have spiraled down quickly.
That place would have been a mess.
Well, not just that, but also like just the murder and violence and everything else.
Yeah, like Westworld kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The one of the things I loved when I around this time period, I had a book that was called the Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was the Enterprise manual, so it was played as if it was the manual you get in Starfleet Academy for Enterprise. So it would tell you about how everything on the Enterprise works, everything, including the holodeck, and it describes how, according to relativity and Einstein equals MC squared, that energy, mass, and light are all the same, really, just different forms of the same. And so it's able to control. It can turn light into matter, which is why you can feel things, and it can alter the light around your eyes so when you're running, it makes the ground shift under you, so you're never really going anywhere. It was wild. It was very cool. That would be a very cool thing to have. But anyway, many episodes involve the holodeck, including arguably the best version of Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, especially Moriarty. I'll get to that in a second. Here's a list and a quick breakdown of what is considered the top 10 episodes of the show. I'll try to be brief here. Number 1 is the best of both worlds. It's parts 1 and 2. It's the split between, it's the end of season 3 and beginning of season 4. Picard is captured and assimilated by the Borg, transformed into Locutus of Borg.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over. From this time forward, you will service us.
One of the greatest cliffhangers in television history. The part 1 finale left audiences in agony all summer. I remember it like yesterday.
Mr. Worf. Fire.
It's widely considered the peak of the entire series. Number 2, The Inner Light. This is my favorite episode of Star Trek. This one right here, The Inner Light. Picard is hit by an alien probe. They're going through space. They see an alien probe. They're like, hey, what's that? They just get close to it. And it seems inert, but a light beam pops out and hits Picard. And then when he opens his eyes, he's like on this world surrounded by all these different people. And the light's really bright. And he finds out that he's like, I'm Jean-Luc Picard. What am I doing here? And they're like, no, you had the fever. And that's why you can't remember who you are, honey. You know, you're whatever his name was. You have a family, a wife. It's his life. And he's still like, you know, I'm Jean-Luc Picard. But eventually, even though he still believes he's Picard, he lives this guy's life for like 50 years and however many years, 40 years. And he has a daughter, he has grandkids and all this. And the sun is getting brighter and brighter and brighter, bigger and bigger and bigger. And they know it's going to go supernova. It's going to kill everybody and everything. But the people on the planet, they don't believe it. Picard's character, the one that he is inhabiting the body of, is the only scientist that really wants to go to space. We need to go to space and try to save our people. By the time they learn, it's too late. It's kind of like Superman now that I think about it. So since they run out of time, he creates a probe with the memories of the guy who invented it. And when he goes up and the whole time throughout the whole episode, this guy's hobby is to play a flute, this flute that they've made, that he made. And as he's playing it, he's getting better and better and all this stuff. It's real, he'll try to play it and then we'll get interrupted and whatever. And then 25 minutes later in the ship time, he wakes back up and they're like, Captain, we were worried about you. You know, you're out for 25 minutes. Nothing we could do would get you. And so he is the person who holds the memory of this whole species of people. And inside of the probe is a little box that spits out at them. And so they bring it in on the tractor beam, and it's the flute that the guy had. Okay. I mean, it was incredible, dude. Incredible episode of storytelling and everything about it was perfect. As a matter of fact, it won the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation.
Wow.
It's great.
Did he, when he's brought back from all that, he's like, but now I lived this whole life. What do you mean?
Yes.
You know, like you're in shock because now you've been living that.
Yes.
You get reeled back to your previous life.
Yeah. So when he comes back, he has the 40 years of memories of being this guy and living every day. I mean, it's wild. It's really cool. Number 3, Yesterday's Enterprise. This is a superbly written and executed story about meaning, sacrifice, and belonging. In it, Enterprise C, I mentioned earlier, emerges through a time wormhole anomaly kind of thing. And at that moment, something changes. You see Picard talking to Worf, and then the scene morphs into an Enterprise D with much darker lighting. And instead of Worf, it's Tasha Yar, who's, supposed to be dead. We switch to Guinan, who's played by Whoopi Goldberg. She's a mysterious character with a deep relationship with Picard, whose species has an unexplainable relationship with time. She comes in occasionally. She's a bartender, but she knows how to deal with people. We see that the Enterprise D is much, much more militaristic. People walking around with weapons and stuff. In this episode, we learned that the Enterprise C was heavily damaged during the attack before being plucked from the battle by this time distortion somehow. Had it remained and been destroyed, it would have led to that treaty. But since it was sucked away before that happened, before the they were able to sacrifice themselves. That sacrifice didn't happen. And in this timeline, the Federation and Klingons have been at war for 20 years. The only one who knows that this isn't right is Guinan, who, having earned his trust, convinces Picard with absolutely no evidence that this isn't right. It works. He trusts her. They convince the Enterprise C to go back in time on a suicide mission to restore the timeline. Tasha Yar, learning from Guinan, whom she had never met, by the way. Guinan wasn't a character when she was on the show, that she isn't supposed to be alive and that her death was, in their real timeline, was meaningless. She decides to go back with the Enterprise C, knowing that she's going to die. But in this timeline, with honor and for a good reason, good cause. Obviously, it works. And in the end, Guinan hails Picard on the bridge and asks if everything's okay. Of course, they're like, huh? They don't know anything that's happened. They don't know that any of this has happened. It is okay. Also, it's interesting that the Picard and stuff on the one in the darker universe, darker timeline, they know that they're going to disappear. Everything they've done for the last 6 years, they're gone. They're never going to have existed. So that also takes sacrifice. So only Guinan knows what happened. In the last shot, she's sharing a drink with Geordi and says, "So, tell me about Tasha Yar." The episode asks some really deep questions, like I said, about sacrifice, belonging, and history. It's really amazing. Number 4, The Measure of a Man. That's in season 2. Data's put on trial to determine whether he's a person with rights or Starfleet property. It's one of the show's best philosophical episodes and a showcase for Brent Spiner. It's also great. You just need to watch it to see how they have this court come out, where basically if Riker has to, since they're out in deep space, this guy comes in and is like, yeah, well, I want you to come. I want to take you apart. This is what he tells the scientist tells Data. I want to take you apart and learn from your positronic brain. Then we can make a Data for every ship. And Data, of course, is like, no, that's not going to happen. The guy who made me is he's Michelangelo of robots. You're not going to be able to do that. And but the guy says, well, you're Starfleet property, so you're going to do it anyway. So he goes to quit, and they're like, no, you can't quit. You're Starfleet property. So they have a trial whether or not Data is life. Is he life? And that's the question through it. It's really cool. The next one is Q Who, which is also season 2. Q, which is basically a godlike character who's annoying as hell. Great. Annoying, great, in a way.
This is also at the time where they start having recurring characters, correct?
Yes. Yeah. He introduces the crew to the Borg for the first time. It's genuinely a pretty frightening episode because nobody, this obviously is the first time any of the fans, Star Trek fans, anything sees him. And basically he just has the power. He's like, oh, so you humans, you think you're all great. You're really curious about what's out there. Well, things out there you can't handle. I'll show you. Poof. And with a wave of his hand, he pushes them on the other side of the galaxy, which would take them like 50 years at top warp speed to get to. And that's where they run into the Borg. But it also introduces the Borg to humanity. So he brings them back to where we were before, but from that moment on, the Borg start heading towards our direction. John Delancey is the guy who plays Q brilliantly. There's some really great episodes with Q. Number 6 called Chain of Command. It's parts 1 and 2 in season 6. It is why Patrick Stewart was born. This is the kind of stuff that he was so good at. Basically, he's captured by the Cardassians, not the Kardashians. The Cardassians, who are a terrible warlike race, just a bunch of assholes, and he's captured.
Not unlike the Kardashians.
Not unlike. I prefer the Cardassians to the Kardashians, but anyway. This guy's actually it's David Warner plays the Cardassian in particular that I'm talking about. He's
David Warner is also he's awesome.
Yeah, he is awesome. It's an acting masterclass in this episode where he's trying to get information from Picard. Picard's resisting. He puts a thing in Picard's chest that causes him a great deal of pain. And so he just tortures him the whole time.
Oh, I've seen the part of the scene recently. There was a reel or something on YouTube recently where I saw that. Yeah.
He has 4 lights behind him. And he asks Picard all the time, like, how many lights do I have? He's like, there's 4. He keeps doing it. He's like, there's 5. There's 5 lights, but there's only 4. So Picard keeps saying, there's 4. There's 4. And then at the end, when he goes to get rescued, when he goes to leave, the guy he knew that he was going to be released soon. So he's really torturing the shit out of Picard to try to get him to say there's 5. And then he has to stop. Picard gets up, he's shaking, he walks away, he turns to him and said, 4! There's 4 lights!
There are 4 lights!
And he goes, and then at the end of the episode, he's talking to Riker, telling him about what happened. And he tells him, number 1, the worst thing was I saw 5 lights at the end. I saw 5 lights. I saw it. But he said it was 4 because he wasn't going to give him what he wanted.
Wow.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Number 7, Elementary, Dear Data. This is the one I mentioned before. Using the holodeck to play Sherlock and Watson, Data and Geordi run into a problem. Data, being a mega genius, knows all of the stories, so he literally solves them in minutes. That frustrates Geordi, who plays Watson. Geordi asks the computer to create a villain capable of truly challenging Data. The computer takes that literally and creates a version of Moriarty that has genuine intelligence and self-awareness. Moriarty becomes sentient and realizes that he's in a sort of play and tries to figure out a way to survive. For most of the episode, it seems that the ship is having problems before they realize that Moriarty is affecting the whole ship, basically outsmarting them all, and through pure willpower is able to leave the holodeck, which is supposed to be impossible. And he can walk around the ship. Well, Data eventually figures out that only he and Picard are real, and that everything they've been experiencing, running around the ship and stuff, trying to stop Moriarty, that they're still in the holodeck. With this information, they tell Moriarty that he and his love interest that they have, I guess that's probably Eileen Adler, I can't remember off the top of my head, that they can have a small ship and explore the galaxy if they just let Picard have control of the ship again. Moriarty gets on the ship, says farewell, and then gives command back to Picard. It's then that you realize that the crew, when having Moriarty get on the ship, actually transferred his program to a self-contained cube, one that has enough adventures to satisfy Moriarty for his natural lifetime. This is the best version and most book-accurate version of Moriarty that I've ever seen. Pretty awesome. Number 8, Sins of the Father, Season 3. Apex of storytelling for Worf. I love this. I think you're definitely going to be familiar with this one. Dealing with the dishonor of his father's betrayal, as they thought, Worf and Picard, while weaving their way through the impending Klingon civil war that threatens to break the peace with the Federation, Worf learns that his father was not a traitor, but had been set up as a scapegoat by one of the Klingons vying for power. Worf is put in a position of either clearing his father's name or letting the peace between the Federation and Klingon Empire fall. Worf, in the highest act of honor, agrees to continue to carry his father's dishonor to save the peace. His only demand is that his brother's honor be restored, which they agree on. At the end of the episodes, and with dramatic lighting falling down, the 15 other family leaders of the Klingon Empire, who they know the truth, by the way, each go to turn their backs on Worf forever. But before they do the thing to their chest to show honor, and then they turn their back. So they all know that what Worf is doing is the highest, most honorable thing he could possibly do.
He's being the sacrifice, the sacrificial lamb, as it were.
Yeah, he's living the Klingon honor. It's very powerful.
They appreciate it. They know they have to turn their back. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's their whole order of things.
Yeah. Or they're going to be at war and wiped out by the Federation. So they know this. They know the scoop. Number 8, Redemption, Season 5, the apex of. I did that already. Sorry. Number 9, The Offspring. Data creates an android child. Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker, he directed this. Basically, Data creates this child, and is trying to teach the child how to be a human and live amongst humans and all that stuff. It's very, very nice. And then you see that the positronic brain starts to malfunction and fall, so it dies. I'll say she, because it's now a life within their universe. And So after it dies, later they're all, telling Data, so sorry. And Data's like, I appreciate your sympathy, but it's not necessary. I don't have any emotions. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? And he said, well, I've taken all of her experiences and memories and put them in myself and in the ship's memory. So she will, in a way, live on that way. And another way of being like, dude, you are a human. What you just did was human. It's very cool. And then finally for that, we're winding it up here, folks, is number 10, All Good Things. It's season 7. It's the series finale where Picard jumps between 3 time periods to solve a mystery that threatens all of humanity's existence. Q returns to close the loop on the series, because that's what happens in the first episode, in a deeply satisfying way. Considered one of the best series finales in television history, they really stuck the landing. Every one of these episodes that I did it again. Every one of these episodes that I mentioned could have had a movie made around it instead of a singular episode, but the writing was so tight, so on point. I mean, nothing ever felt right.
These were all hour-long episodes, but, which in reality means they were 40-some minutes.
48 minutes, something like that. Yeah,
wow.
47. If I have one issue with the show, it's the general A story, B story format that they pretty much did it almost every week. Not every week, but 90% of the time. You'd have a story in it where Picard and Data are discussing. You'd have the story in an episode where Picard and Data are discussing deep philosophical questions, interspersed with the B story where Deanna Troi and Riker are trying to find some ice cream. Okay, I made that scenario up completely. But, my point is that often the A story was incredible, way good. And the B story was between good and Not always, but more often than not. The A story was
I'm
a
guessing
4 out of 5.
The B story was probably more just to flesh out some of the other characters.
Yeah. I would, that kind of thing. That more often than not, the A story was a 4 or 5 out of 5.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm definitely enticed to watch it now. I should have watched it since I am Gen X, and I'm like, well, I didn't watch a lot of this.
Yeah. The A story was 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, and the B story was 2.5 or 3 out of 5 stars most of the time. However, this
you
really
mean Pop Rocks?
Well, let me finish this. We'll get to that here just 1 second.
All right.
However, this doesn't bring the series down at all. Its highs are so high that the lows are forgotten. This series was the best science fiction show in television history, even more so than Farscape, I must admit. It brought back the Star Trek franchise. It kicked off the trend of made-for-syndication shows and helped redefine what quality science fiction could be on the medium of television. It made Patrick Stewart a household name. It created several of the greatest characters in fiction. It literally raised the bar on everything. Can I recommend Star Trek The Next Generation? I'll do you one more. I'll say that if you don't watch this show, in order from start to finish, you're doing yourself and your ancestors a disservice. Unsurprisingly, 10 out of 10 Pop Rocks. It's absolutely the best.
11 out of 10. Honestly. I always felt in the beginning I thought, I don't want to see this because I was just so used to original series.
Right.
And then looking at it...
most people felt that way, probably.
Yeah, but then looking at it later, you've realized that's the one that really brought Star Trek around to a new generation of viewers.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the next generation for Star Trek; it's the next generation for the viewers, and they could take some of the premise of the original and do better with it.
Yeah, which they did.
And it also opened up all these other Star Trek series and franchises. It just brought it up to I think a much more serious, just a higher level overall. Yeah.
It was no longer a cartoon. Basically, which I love the original series. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But this is a much
it came from a different era of TV too.
Yeah, right. And from Star Trek: The Next Generation, you also from that came Deep Space Nine, which I never watched. I was never into Deep Space Nine for some reason. It just never caught me. And then you had after that you had Voyager, which I liked a whole lot. I loved Voyager actually.
Mm-hmm.
especially once it hit its sea legs, so to speak, its space legs, if you want, it was great. And then there was Enterprise, which is the one with Scott Bakula.
Yeah,
and
that was going further back, like prior
that was the
to the original series timeline.
Prior to Starfleet even. And they'd had basically 5 seasons that they had marked that was going to be the arc, ending with the creation of Starfleet. And unfortunately, they only got 4 seasons. So that last season, they had to put 2 seasons worth of stuff in it and ran. I mean, it never really got, I think people kind of had, they were just kind of over that same thing by that point. I think the people who loved all those other Star Treks I mentioned had kind of moved on, had kids, didn't have time to watch it, whatever.
Well, I think
just
the other
wasn't.
thing is then you just had a glut, It was like the 90s was just like series after series after series.
Yeah.
And like you say, if you're trying to space it out to get a new generation of people, then it's almost like it was too soon. If they had spaced it a little further out,
right,
maybe it would have. But
I loved them all. I even liked other than Deep Space Nine, but they were not on a spaceship. They were on a what do you call it?
Space station.
A space station. Yeah. So they weren't like going out doing stuff, but it just wasn't my thing. But I loved Voyager a whole lot. And then I thought Enterprise was really good
interesting
too.
Enough, one that we didn't even get into, but I just thought about it, particularly when you mentioned Deep Space Nine, was Babylon 5.
Yeah, that was on the list too, but I was like, we already got enough, as you can tell. It's 3.5 hours. It's like.
But I do feel like, a lot of people were like, it's just Star Trek or whatever. But in a sense of, it was a lot like it, but it was still a quality show.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was much more of like an interaction of all these different alien races. And I guess it was like their meeting place, as it were.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah, I never watched it, but I know it was on for quite a while.
Straczynski, I should say. He was the main writer, and then I think he also wrote some comics. I can't remember which ones he did, but yeah, it's one of those where I was like, I'm not even watching these Star Trek shows. I'm not watching that one.
Right.
It's just too
I never
much.
saw it either, but it was, and I think also that Gen X, at least, we're, at our ages, we're at the bottom end of the top end, or we're at the top of the middle Gen X, if you want to say. Yeah. And so, by that point, we were starting to get to where, we had careers and people getting families and stuff. So you just didn't have time to hang out and watch Star Trek all the time, I guess.
And I guess you couldn't be like me, who's like 40-some years old, and I'm still watching Adult Swim.
Well, Adult Swim existed for a reason, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let me see, on to the next thing there. Okay,
let's wind it
down.
Yeah,
let's wind it on down.
You got it, old chum. Whew, as usual, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was a lot. But
yeah,
there were many, many more made-for-syndication shows that existed, and the trend really went into the early 2000s. Silk Stockings, Baywatch, War of the Worlds, Andromeda, Earth Final Conflict, just to name a few. But the ones we did the deep dive on are objectively the best.
Yeah.
This period of time was unique in the life of Gen X. It was before the internet took over with YouTube and video and all of that ballyhoo, and more channels are coming on the cable, which was king, and these shows were popping up left and right. They varied in quality and budget, but they all had a familiar aspect about them that if I ask you about Made-For-Syndication, you could probably envision one without listening to this podcast. But please listen to this podcast.
Yeah. We put a little
they
bit
were
of time
everywhere
in.
And ingrained in pop culture, a break from the same old. The networks have been feeding us for 45 years at that point. If you have any cool memories of Made-For-Syndication shows, those we have talked about or those we've missed, let us hear about them on the Twitters at Rusty Playpod, which is the main place to find us.
Yep.
Fans on it all day. I sometimes go on and go, oh shit, he wrote something again. Let me comment on that one.
Well, I usually swap between my real one and this one. I know that our episodes are long, but first of all, we only do them like once a month. So
this has been a much belated one.
Yeah.
Apologies on that.
If you do it like what I do with long podcasts, it remembers where you were at. right? So you can just watch whatever you want, and then then when you want to stop and come back to it later. But either way, we're having fun doing it. I know that this is long, but hopefully you've had a bit of fun along the way.
And that's what she said.
Yeah, and are
we the first generation to go with that? That's what she said.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I think it really took off with Michael Scott. So he was the one throwing that in there, but he didn't invent it. So
no, we were saying that in the 80s.
Yeah,
he was just saying it like inappropriately.
Because he was from the 80s. He's a Gen Xer, so he was probably writing something he knew. Yeah, that's what we used to. I remember being in high school saying that. So
yeah.
But
anyway,
anyways, we look back at this influential time on both media and Gen X history. So stay tuned next for Matty's song, and until next time, because I love the songs that he does. They're freaking hilarious.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Until next time, see you on the playground.
Peace.
All right.
MacLeod and Duncan MacLeod, both born in Glenfinnan, in the Highlands of Scotland. Cousins, but not the kissing ones. It's not that kind of show. A neutral good rogue ranger and a lawful good paladin. When they get together, it's a collision course of wackiness. You got your villain's brains splat on my damsel in distresses' cloak. Your claymore's no match for my katana is two. Flashback to a flashback. How can there be only one? Connor has to die for there to still be a show, I think. Lathered in many amazing characters. Lathered? Tess is killed off in season 2. Too soon? Richie's Robin but doesn't steal tires or get killed with a crowbar. Adam's looking for Mathos, which is himself mystery solved. Ric Flair was not the living embodiment of death but hubris. In spades, Darius was evil, then he wasn't. Then he was killed by someone not immortal, so no quickening there. In short, this one's got lots of pop rocks. Renegade, Vincent was a cop and good at his job, but he committed the ultimate sin and testified against other cops gone bad. They tried to kill him but didn't do a good job, since they killed someone else, his wife. Oh no, tears are falling. Now he prowls the Badlands, an outlaw hunting outlaws, a bounty hunter, renegade. Make up your mind, help some people out each episode, like the AT much. Focusing on Six Killer and Cheyenne was a better touch. Cool names at least, martial arts and action galore. Then Llama's got a new girlfriend and put her on the show. And then he cut his hair and had to wear roadkill. No mojo there. Then the show ended without showing the filmed ending, because there were bigger plans for the show, like a cartoon and breakfast cereal. About half a bag of green apple pop rocks. Cena and Hercules, Sam Raimi's campy mashups of fantasy, action and snark. If you like sex appeal, simple plots, charismatic leads, cute sidekicks, over the top action, or implied lesbianism, there's something here for you. If you like historical accuracy, you should be watching PBS. Nerd, Hercules is Hercules. Xena is an enigma. Bruce Campbell is the king, baby. So they each feature characters that never really met, but who cares? Why can't Genghis Khan hang out with Caesar, or Groucho Marx with Nero? Do you want to see Lucy Lawless or don't you? I didn't want to see her get killed, what the deuce? Did I mention Sam Raimi made these? All the pop rocks, man, at least 7 out of 10. Farscape, a really, really mind-blowing sci-fi show from over 25 years ago that you should see for the puppetry alone. But there's a story too, and a lot of characters with no backstory to adhere to. You get a lot of creativity, the way you would with a sci-fi show, as you do. Rigel is Dr. Smith as a puppet on a scooter. A bald blue-skinned priestess, John, zapping you with her mind. Moya is the ship. Crichton is us. Scorpius is not us. I don't know, man, just watch it. It's too cool to not get all the pop rocks. Forever Knight, Nick at Night is soft porn. Nick Knight is a vampire, don't get them confused. And don't think Detective Snacky won't get skanky or die off camera between seasons. Don't think they won't end the show on a beller where the love interest is killed by Nick.
and his frenemy won't kill him to ease his suffering. They could have had all the pop rocks. Star Trek, the next generation. Picard is better than Kirk, no one at first said. Data and Spock are in a dead heat from the get-go. And what about the emotional doctor versus the empathetic empath? Who emotes better? Is Riker the new Sulu? What's the analog? And a Klingon on the deck, Kirk's rolling in his grave wreckage. Then everyone realized the show kicked the first show's ass. You heard a lot about a lot of good episodes, very special episodes. Some of them featured the holodeck, some focused on Data being more human than human. If you don't like this show, you're dead inside or a Borg. There aren't enough pop rocks in my imagination to give to this show. And best of all, no AI was used in the making of these programs. But this song, I digress.